up, everyone? Welcome to another Team Kitchen Fable video. We got an interesting one today. I'm joined by Steven and Zach. We're going to be talking about some super cool rules, interactions, new mechanics, things to maybe keep in the back pocket for some games, and things to know that your opponent can do against you in some games. So, with that said, Steven and Zach, you guys want to talk about your history in judging and interacting with the rules in this game?
Yeah, sure, Shaq. Go ahead first.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, but me and Steve are both level one judges. Both started end of the crew era. Been
Mhm.
enjoying the game. Obviously part of Team Kitchen Fable, and looking forward to it. Um, gonna be judging Proquest for Louis in West Virginia coming up, and um, yeah, I mean, it's always an interesting side to things when you're playing card games. Just being at that top competitive level, but also having a deeper understanding goes a long way, even if you're not a judge. So we're hoping this will help you guys out.
Yep, I agree. For me, yeah, like Zach said, I also started in the crew era. Had a fairly small locals. It was about, I believe, 6 to 8 people coming along, and they needed somebody to um, kind of step up to the plate for the judging. So I decided to like help out in that regard. Now we have a pretty good community, a Discord with almost 200 members. So I was able to take a back seat on that, the judging side, so I could focus more on the competitive side because I was always just like the next step for me. Always really interested in playing competitive. So yeah.
Yeah, thanks, guys. With that said, I think we can just jump in and we're just gonna do some quick fire talking about all the different cards that we thought were kind of interesting. So
Hmm.
the first one is specifically the Heave mechanic, which is seen on quite a few Guardian cards. It reads, if the card is in your hand and you have an empty arsenal zone at the beginning of your end phase, you can pay 3 or whatever the Heave cost is, put it into your arsenal face up, and then create seismic surges equal to the number of Heave. So it's obviously a super powerful one, and Pulverize is quite a strong card. But something to know about this is if you're running Crown of Seeds specifies that you can only put a card on the bottom if it's face down. So you're gonna have to be careful heaving cards in willy-nilly, because if you get stuck with one of those there, it might be a while before you can get it out. And also you're losing your arsenal zone, and your opponent knows what you're gonna do. So yeah, that's a good one to know about, just to not get trapped. It's already happened to me at least once or twice in testing a set.
Yeah. And then another note is that it does happen during your end step. So there is no priority window in the end phase. So once you start heaving, the opponent can't really respond to this like Kano or
Right.
Prism or anything like that.
Yeah,
Yeah, and there's technically still a way out of it with Star of the Show Bravo. You get Tome of Harvest as well.
True.
yeah. There's ways that you can save yourself from it for sure.
All right, so now we're going on Steadfast. Steadfast says prevent the next 6 damage that would be dealt to your hero this turn by a source of your choice. So when you actually play Steadfast, you don't have to declare the source that you're going to be preventing. Depending on the game state, it might be pretty obvious for your opponent of what you're going to choose. But on resolution is when you choose the target source that you will be preventing from. Um, and there's a really interesting interaction to give an example of Sting of Sorcery and then Singeing Steel Blade. So once you play Sting of Sorcery and then play Singeing Steel Blade afterwards, you'll be dealing 2 different sources of arcane damage, 1 each, and then the 4 physical. If you choose play Steadfast in response to the arcane damage coming through, and you choose a Singeing Steel Blade, since it's all coming from 1 card, 1 source, you would prevent all 6, the 2 pings and the 4 physical damage. Another note is that loss of life is not damage, so that can be prevented. A good example of that is Ode to Wrath from Prism that says if you're dealt damage, you also lose life. Um, so yeah, that's what we're gonna say about Steadfast.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Steadfast
for
is a
sure.
pretty strong tool, I think, that Guardian got in this set for sure, given
Hmm.
that it can stop like multiple pings of damage. And also a quick note on knowing when a some damage is coming from one source or multiple. If you go back and look at Seeds of Agony, before it was errataed, it actually does the arcane damage, but they actually errated seeds to say the next attack gains when you attack with this, deal 1 arcane. So
Hmm.
that means now that arcane is coming from that attack as the source. So that's a quick way to know if something's coming from one source or coming from like maybe another non-attack you played on the turn.
Hmm.
Yeah, definitely an interesting one. Up next, we've got Pyroglyphic Protection. Interesting action for Wizard. Blocking 3 is pretty okay at red. Um, Costing 2 seems a little high, but you do have this in as an aura. Reads out if your hero would be dealt arcane damage, prevent 3 arcane damage that source would deal. At the beginning of your action phase, destroy Pyroglyphic Protection. Uh, it's definitely interesting as I almost see it as a Wizard Mirror like card. Especially considering something like Forked Lightning, which while it does have the text of getting 2 lines of damage, it is considered one source, which is important to note. It's more in the lines of when you buff it with, say, Crucible or Metacarpus Node, it gets that buff twice. So +1, it's going to get +2, and then all that damage comes in at one source. So definitely some interesting things between Pyroglyphic and Steadfast. Blocking more arcane than we've seen before. We've been kind of stuck in this days of how much arcane barrier can you really afford to run in your equipment slots. So it's definitely interesting to see some utility here, both on the rules side of things, evolving to block more arcane damage, and in turn giving you guys more utility.
Yeah, and actually, it doesn't even specify that you destroy it when you're dealt damage. So if Kano plays this on his turn, maybe in the Kano mirror, and then the opponent,
Yeah.
basically every single one of their sources is going to get reduced by 3 until it goes to your turn.
Hmm.
So it obviously doesn't say destroy it, but a lot of effects like this we've seen in the past that prevent damage get destroyed the first time they happen. Um, so
For sure.
that's a good note. If you hopped over that, you might see it as a stronger card.
Yep, definitely
Hmm.
a solid choice. It'll be interesting to see kind of use cases here, just given that it seems more like a mirror card.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure we're really set to expect a bunch of wizards upcoming in the meta, but potentially even good for Blitz for sure. I know a lot of Kano people been brewing around Ice Lantern and upgrading Kano for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so the next one is Twin Twisters, and this is a modal card where you have to choose one. And when I first looked at this card, I kind of compared it to Become the Arc Knight in my own like kind of headcanon rules understanding. Become the Arc Knight had updated wording, and you can actually you must choose a mode, but there are some maze in there, so you don't actually end up having to execute the mode. But with Twin Sisters, you have to choose one. It doesn't say up to one. Um, so the time where this is going to be the most relevant is when you're playing Benji and you want to keep stuff under the threshold of being blockable by cards from hand. Uh, you might need to adjust your sequencing to make sure you don't over buff a card because you can't just play it and then not give this one and the next one a buff. Obviously, buffing is good, but interestingly, in the context of Benji, you don't want to make it too high that it becomes blockable sometimes. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah,
Not,
that's just a quick one.
yeah, not much to say about Twin Twisters. I agree with that one. Um, yeah, so moving forward. We got the Helm of Sharp Eye. It is going to be a helm piece. It's going to be an attack reaction that we have here. It says destroy Helm of Sharp Eye, and then you get to banish the top card of your deck, and you may play it this combat chain, and you can only activate the ability if you control a weapon with power greater than twice its base power. So since it is a warrior equipment, I will be going through real quick the warrior weapons that we have. So we have Raiden, that's 0, so it only needs to be at 1 or more for Helm of Sharp Eye to be quote unquote active. For Dawnblade, since it is base 3, it has to go all the way up to 7 power for Helm of Sharp Eye to be able to be executed. And the other 2 attack weapons, they have to be at 5 to be able to play it. Um, So it is a really weird card. It does not let you play cards out of the normal priority window as an instant because it doesn't have that line of tech that it can be played. You can play your card as an instant. Um, and then additionally, if you have a very non-attack heavy deck, maybe like Dorinthia or maybe like Kasai that plays some non-attacks, you won't be able to use those non-attacks to continue on in the combat chain, since technically during the rules there are right now, um, when you play a non-attack action, you immediately close the combat chain, and that just doesn't work in the way that people might have expected. So heavy attack reaction decks, great, um, but maybe some non-attacks, and then some attack action cards for bolting as well. Those are fine to continue the chain, of course. Yeah, and it's the same with the Mask of the Pouncing Lynx, of course. It is also another attack or another equipment that lets you search up a card, but again, you have to play it when it is legal to continue to play the card and not just as an instant.
Yeah, there's I found quite a few different classes share like interesting themes. Like you have ninja and warrior that can grab cards to play them in the helm piece. But
Hmm.
there's also some cards later on with Runeblade and Dash that share some themes as well. We'll
Hmm.
get to those in a second.
For sure. Up next, we've got a Shatter, got a warrior attack reaction, 0 cost, yellow pitch. Reading until end of turn, target two-hand weapon gains whenever this would deal damage. Instead, you may destroy a defending equipment with armor power less than the damage that would be dealt this way. One of the most interesting things with this, I think, is the fact that it triggers during damage calculation, so you can't respond to that. Kind of just covered that with Steven not too long ago, but if you were, say, blocking with Tunic, you can't then use that Tunic resource in response to it blowing up because damage calculation happens.
Hmm.
So you'd either have to use it before, um, you know, before blocking or on play of something, or during the reaction window, which is definitely kind of interesting. Realistically, still being able to use it, you have multiple windows of priority, but knowing when to use it is important for sure, as you can't respond to that damage calculation step.
Hmm. Yep. And I did learn this recently, which is also very interesting. As Zach mentioned, it is a replacement effect. And another card that is very commonly a replacement effect is the Spectral Shields. So a good example is if Raiden is coming in for 3 and the opponent has 3 Spectral Shields and you play Shatter on your Raiden, you get to choose your replacement effect first and therefore not deal the damage. And since you would have dealt damage, and then the shields would have replaced them, technically you can uh, destroy an equipment with damage that you would have dealt, because technically you still would have dealt the damage. It's just that the spectral shield would have replaced it. It's a very very interesting interaction there. Since replacement effects are very fun.
Yeah, yeah. Replacement effects have been hitting us hard ever since Ball Lightning came out, and probably some smaller ones before that. But yeah, for anyone that wants a tip on replacement effects, if you see the verbiage "whenever blank" instead blank, that means it's a replacement effect.
There you go.
So you can apply the replacement effect logic to anything that has that kind of um, verbiage, I suppose.
Hmm.
The next one's another quick one for me, fatigue shot. The interesting interaction here is with the other hero that cares about base damage, which is KO. So if fatigue shot ends up hitting KO, um, the first attack base damage is going to get rounded down by half or by halved and then rounded up. So if
Hmm.
your first attack is not more than 13 damage, you're not even going to get the chance to roll KO. Um, I think this is the first time we've seen an effect like this that's actually changing the base damage of a card instead of like subtracting by half or adding by half.
Hmm.
But yeah, if you're playing KO out there, and I know I certainly plan to play some KO when I have some Blitz events coming up, um, don't get hit by fatigue shot. Or do if you don't want your first one to get the chance of getting halved, then you just for sure want it to get halved.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that's an
Jacob's ready
interesting
to
one for
roll.
sure. Oh yeah, I'm so ready.
Speaking of Blitz, classes or heroes, Kasai, and I'll be playing Kasai myself because big fan of this card, Blood on Her Hands. So this one. So it has a lot of modes that you can choose. So as an additional cost to play Blood on Her Hands, you may destroy any number of copper tokens that you control, and for each copper token destroyed, this way you can choose a mode, and you may choose each mode twice. So you know you never want to do this, but you can choose technically 0 copper. But I'm sure you'll have some copper out there if you're playing Kasai, so you don't have to worry that much about it. Um, so and then as well, some other interactions that you might know already is that Go Again does not stack up. So when you're targeting a one-handed weapon to give Go Again, you do want to choose each one individually for the weapon that attacks each time. So to attack twice, sorry, it says target one-handed weapon may attack twice this turn. You also want to like split it up so each one can attack twice. And then interesting for this one is that target one-handed weapon has +1 while attacking this turn. That one you can split actually however you want. You don't have to do like 1 and 1. You can actually do like 2 and 0, and that way you have a little bit stronger weapon swing if you're so inclined that you think you need one weapon to maybe be a little bit weaker than the other for some reason. Maybe the damage numbers line up a little better in that way. And then another thing I want to note that Blood on Our Hands does not max out the amount of times you can attack with that weapon. So for an example, if you have Twinning Blade in your deck additionally to this, and you Twinning Blade your Centauri Saber, Twinning Blade says that you can attack with it an additional time. So with Blood on Our Hands and Twinning Blade, Centauri Saber can attack a total of 3 times.
Yeah,
Mhm.
but it does not stack with itself. You can't say you can't choose the
True.
third mode on the same weapon. Well, you can, but it's just not going to let it attack 4 total times.
Exactly. That
Yeah.
is true. Perfect.
Cool. Up next, we've got some mech cards. Jacob didn't tell me what kind of lightning round we got of cards lined up for this, but just overall, kind of touching on the theme of getting new effects that worry about boosts, pretty interesting. And kind of wanted to touch on the distinction between what counts as a boost versus counting a boost on a combat chain. We have T-Bone up now, so T-Bone reads, if you control a card on the combat chain that was boosted, the defending hero must defend T-Bone with an equipment they control if able. And then it has boost itself. So interesting to note, because it is talking about cards that are boosted on the combat chain, T-Bone includes itself because you boost T-Bone and it's on the combat chain. Normally, we're used to the verbiage of something like payload, where it's if you have boosted this, or no, payload's also combat chain, right?
I think Payload also
Yeah,
says if you
yeah.
have this combat chain. So
So
because it doesn't have boost.
rotary ram would be the other one. If you boosted this turn, is what we're used to.
Yeah.
Sorry to kind of flip around. But yeah, payload would be the same thing. Combat chain, and what it's counting is itself. If it had boost, which it doesn't, so I guess that's still a good comparison there.
Mhm.
But also good to note, even if you fail the boost, it doesn't get go again. It still counts a boost every time you attempt to, banish a card and get that mech card for the ability. But yeah, I mean, that was just kind of everything else seems pretty self-explanatory on the mechanologist side of things. Just wanted to touch based on how the new boost I guess mechanics work now towards
Yep.
abilities and looking at the combat chain rather than how many times you've actually boosted in a turn.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's also a question of whether you have like continuous effects or things that just resolve, and then if it changes later, it's different. But with boost, it's an additional cost. So that boost, if your very first attack is T-Bone, you have to boost, and then the card text is red, and that's why it sees itself. Um,
Hmm.
Yep.
so. Yep. So the next one is another interesting theme that I think Mech and you could say Mech and Runeblade kind of share, which is caring about things that the hero already does on a single or a number of times. There's quite a few Runeblade cards that care about creating an aura. So,
Hmm.
namely, that's going to be Runechant tokens. Um, but the Runechant, these ones actually I think are checking continuously. So the first obvious example is if you play a non-attack and then you play like Shrill of Skullform, Viscerize ability will create a rune chant, and then Shrill of Skullform will get +3. Additionally,
Yep.
if you use Spellbound Creepers to cast like read the runes at instant speed, the rune chants from there also get counted towards Shrill of Skullform's ability.
Hmm.
Same for the other ones that actually count number of auras that you've created. All of that stuff is like live and being checked until damage calculation, basically. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, there's definitely some interesting ones there. The Runeblade cards are going to be the ones to watch out for on the opponent's side. And I mean, if you're playing Viscera, I definitely know about those interactions. But if you're not worried about a Shrill coming in for 4, you might want to consider if it's going to matter if it gets buffed by 3, and the next attack might have some rune chance. So that's a good one
I
to know
think
about for sure.
I
Hmm.
think even more interesting to note is, I mean, Rune Chant obviously comes off top of the head as the more obvious one, but we still have Briar who can make the Lightning token, which is an aura. We still have Chain who can make a Soul Shackle, which is also an aura.
Hmm.
So even just playability, like Chain can give this go again with a Soul Shackle and trigger the bonus just by doing so.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a really
Definitely
smooth
some,
interaction.
Yep.
yeah.
I was gonna say it's gonna
Some
going down
big
the
plays
list.
there, right?
All
That and
all the room blades.
Spellbound Creepers. You can also, if you're gonna like at instant speed, play a Read the Runes or something else, creating an
Classic.
aura.
Yep. Yep. Those are also really good. Yeah. All the room blades. I just kind of realized they all make auras to some
Yeah,
regard. So they all just synergize with with this card.
for sure.
Definitely.
Hmm. All right. So now we have an illusionist card, Crown of Reflection. So this one reads, you can destroy the Crown of Reflection, and then you can destroy a target illusionist aura you control. And if you do, you can put an illusionist aura from your hand into the arena with cost less than or equal to the aura destroyed this way. Now this text, the next one here is the most important part. You can only activate Crown of Reflection during your action phase. Um, yeah, this one's it's pretty powerful to get your new zero cost auras in play. I would say one of the good ways that you could use it would be to destroy your spectral shields during your turn, because when you destroy a spectral shield with Crown of Reflection, it actually returns a value of 0, so you can put in a zero cost aura that way, since those zero cost auras do not have go again. Um, if for some reason you go ahead and Crown of Reflections and then you target an illusionist aura, and somehow, in the future, something happens that the aura gets destroyed. Actually, what actually can happen is you can target your Spectral Shield, and then Kano can respond with dealing you arcane damage. And if that were to happen and your target gets destroyed, then Crown of Reflections will fizzle. It will still get destroyed itself, unfortunately, so you kind of lose out on that effect that way.
Yep.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's definitely a good one to know about when your auras could potentially get destroyed. Don't bait yourself into doing it. Or maybe you want to get next level and bait your opponent into attacking you, and really you didn't even care about the Crown of Reflection ability.
Also true. Also
Yeah.
true.
Yep. So the last one we have on the early list is Skull Crushers, one of a pretty cool card. I'm a brute enjoyer, and I'm definitely going to be using this in KO. Um, but everyone should know that you can only roll a die if the game state tells you to. So just like discarding cards, you can't just willy-nilly discard a card. I think every single card game acts like that. Um, the same rule applies for rolling a die, so you can't just be like, I'm just gonna start my turn, roll a die, get a 5 or a 6, and get some +1s on my stuff. You have to do it if a card tells you to.
Yes, this does not mean that you can't continue to use your die roll as your favorite mode of randomization for stuff like Intimidate, maybe. But
True.
if you roll a die to randomize and Intimidate, that's not the game state telling you. So, you don't have to worry about Skull Crushers being active in that
Yep.
specific die roll.
Yep. That is a good point. Yep. So those are all the cards that we thought were interesting. I think if you guys have some more interesting ones, definitely add them in the comments. But we have another treat to end the video with, and that's going to be some tabletop simulator kind of simulations of more in-depth and kind of complex interactions that are possible with some of the new cards. So we'll go ahead and cut to that. So We have our TTS lobby open, and we want to showcase an interesting interaction with Swarming Gloomveil, which is another one of those Runeblade cards that cares about how many auras you've created. It has three
Mhm.
modes. If you've created one or more aura, it's go again. If you've created two or more, it gains +1 damage. And if you've created three or more auras, when this hits a hero, they can't prevent arcane damage from sources you control this turn. So those are the modes to know about on this card. And that being said, we'll hop into Zach and Sean. With that being said, we'll hop into Zach
Yeah.
and Steven.
Thanks.
They showing how this interaction can potentially do some interesting things.
Hmm.
Cool. So right now we're on Viscerai's turn, 3 to 7. Looking a bit dire here. We're gonna open up with a non-attack action as Viscerai tends to do, drawing into a completely stacked Revel in Runeblood. This is gonna come in for the interaction later, but to start things off, we are going to hit it with a Swarming Gloomveil. So, of course, creating a rune chant off of that with Viscerai's ability. Um, right now, we are just coming in for 3 with Go Again because we have only triggered the first ability. So we're going to pass priority over to Steven, see if he's got anything for us.
Yep, and for this situation, I will just decline to block this attack.
Cool. So moving back to our priority, we are actually going to activate Spellbound Creepers, which says once per turn instant. We can put a bind counter on Spellbound Creepers and play our next non-attack action card this turn as those whereas an instant, which we can only activate after we have either played an attack or blocked with an attack.
Hmm.
Because we're attacking with Swarming, we're going to go ahead and activate that pitching Whisper the Oracle. So we're going to have 2 resources floating here. And using our Revel that we drew off Gorganian Tome, we're going to play that as an instant, creating another 4, technically 5 rune chants. So we're up to 6 here.
Oof.
Um, off of Viscerai's ability, and then the 4 from Revel. Um, Key thing for this is we have now, in the same priority step of Swarming Gloomveil attacking, created 3 or more rune chants. So this is coming in for 4 with Go Again. And then on hit, Steven can no longer block arcane damage from sources we control this turn. And we'll still have 2 resources left, so we'll be able to swing Rosetta after this.
Yep, that's right. And in this situation, yes, so this Swarming Gloomveil will go ahead and hit me, and I would go down to 3 life because I will not be putting any defense reactions in response to any of this.
Cool. So utilizing the rune chants we just created because Revel would blow them all up in the end of the turn if we don't use them. We're going to go ahead and spend that 1 and Rosetta for 6 arcane from the rune chants as separate sources, 2 arcane from Rosetta, and 2 physical.
Yep. So if I take all this damage, obviously I would die, and I want to try to prevent that. So what I will be doing in response to the rune chants coming in will be to play this Merciful Retribution, pitching a few nice cards here, and then continue after it resolves with the Merciful Retribution. I'll be playing this Prismatic Shield, again pitching 1 more card, and I'll be creating 3 Spectral Shield tokens. And now here we go, the interaction with Swarming Gloomveil and the Rune Chants, all their very great replacement effects. So what happens if exactly here is that each Rune Chant will pop 1 at a time. So let's say we're just going to visualize it here as the first Rune Chant popping in. Since these Spectral Shields prevent the damage, but then again, Swarming Gloomveil says it can be prevented. So this 1 Rune Chant, just the first one, the Spectral Shield will check the Rune Chant. It says it can't be prevented, but it will still pop. The second one will still see the Rune Chant because it still wasn't prevented, and it's the damage coming in, so it will still pop as well. And then this one, again, the same thing, and it will pop as well. And then finally, after all that is said and done, this Rune Chant will finally go through, but it also trigger and give me that 1 damage. That still does happen, but then these Spectral Shields breaking will trigger a replacement effect of, or just a triggered effect of Merciful Retribution, and deal 3 arcane damage to our favorite Runeblade.
Yeah, so this is kind of a nutty situation to be in. I think it's something to know about. It's a random endgame scenario that you probably want to avoid. Um, in this scenario, it works out in Prism's favor, but if they don't have that merciful retribution, it actually works out in Viscerai's favor. But the funny thing about that is if Viscerai ever hit you with a swarming Gloomveil, you're probably not going to create
Hmm.
any spectral shields anyways. So the knowledge that rune chants are just going to burn through all your spectral shields is good to have. Don't create spectral shields after Storm and Gloom Veil hits you, and unless you have Merciful Retribution, and then you can just like nuke them back. Uh, so,
Yep.
so definitely a very interesting thing that has happened with all of the effects in the new set, and once again, it has to do with replacement effects.
We love
Right.
those.
Yep. Yep. So the next one we're going to talk about is fractal replication.
Okay,
Okay.
so now we have the very nice interaction between, uh, well, mostly of the card Fractal Replication and other cards with choose mode and modal effects. So for this scenario, I will be playing Phantasmify, that it costs 1, pitching this card. I'll have 2 resources floating, and then I will be choosing to play this Enlightened Strike. So when I go ahead and play Enlightened Strike, I'll be choosing the mode draw a card. And then we're going to pretend a little bit here that I have a yellow card in my pitch zone and it has go again for this scenario. But I'll be playing this Inline Strike for 5, 6, 7, well, 10 with draw a card. So I just go ahead and draw a card for this scenario. And then I'm going to switch this out here. Boom. So there's a yellow card in my pitch zone. It will have go against it as it is an illusionist card because Phantasm 5 gave it that effect. And then following this scenario, I will be playing Fractal Replication. So Fractal Replication will see that Inline Strike is an illusionist card, but it will only copy the base abilities of the card on top of all the other effects. So, whew, so let's read this card a little bit. So when you play or defend with Fractal Replication against the abilities and effects of all illusionist attack action cards on the combat chain. So when it comes to effects, it only copies the base abilities that it has. So it will go ahead and copy the draw a card because when you play in Lion Strike, you choose what kind of text it will have. And technically in Lion Strike, the mode that I chose would give it the effect of when you attack with this, draw a card. So Fractal Replication has when you attack with this, draw a card. And then it also copies the base value of the attack. So instead of having 10 attack, the Fractal Replication will have 5 attack, and then it looks at the defense, and it will have 3 defense. So once again, when I attack with Fractal Replication, I'm just going to head and draw a card, and then it will only come in for 5 with go again, thanks to the Luminaris. Additionally, since Phantasmify adds Phantasm to Enlightened Strike, it is not one of the base abilities that it copies, so Fractal Replication will not have Phantasm for the purposes of what it copies. Um, yeah, and I think I've pretty much covered all the nuances there.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm sure that's going to be one of the most judge called cards at
For sure.
events. Uh, I guess less so if you're not running Phantasmify, but if you're running
Yeah,
Phantasmify, it's like every generic in the game is going to be at your disposal.
For
But
sure.
yeah, it's a super
Yeah, I
interesting one.
think I think Enlightened Strike just posed as one of the more important ones to cover for sure
mhm,
with the modes given. There was definitely a lot of back and forth on whether or not you would get to choose again.
mhm,
Um, but given how the release notes for Enlightened Strike is with choosing the mode on play, um, Fractal Replication and the Everfest release notes copies the ability on play but does not repeat it because it's not considered being played. It is already played and then copying a card. So it is going to copy that mode for Enlightened Strike without choosing again.
exactly. Perfect.
Yeah, so I hope you guys got some interesting tidbits of knowledge out of this. If you go back and rewatch the video and count how many times we said interesting, I want to know the answer because it's probably a lot. But yeah, so it's just some good stuff to know. Don't get caught out by your opponents, and catch your opponents out on doing some interesting things of your own. And yeah, hope everyone has some good tournaments with the new Everfest cards. And we appreciate you guys watching. You can give us a subscribe if you like the video. That'd be awesome. We're almost at 500, and so we're really excited about that. Thanks, everyone.
Peace.
Thanks, guys.